The bustling terminal of Chicago O'Hare fell silent as an elderly woman in a faded military jacket stood alone at Gate 12, tears streaming down her weathered face. Moments earlier, a group of impatient travelers had been openly mocking her slow movement through security, rolling their eyes as she struggled with her worn canvas bag. "Some people shouldn't be allowed to fly," one had whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. But as she stood there, devastated by their cruelty, no one noticed the small purple ribbon pinned to her chest, a medal that would soon reveal a story of courage that would leave the entire airport in stunned silence. What happened next would remind everyone that heroes don't always look the way we expect them to. Eleanor Martinez clutched her boarding pass with trembling fingers as she navigated through the crowded security checkpoint at Chicago O'Hare International Airport. At 78 years old, her movements were deliberate but slow, each step carefully measured as arthritis reminded her of battles fought long ago. Her faded olive-green military surplus jacket hung loosely on her small frame, and her worn canvas duffel bag seemed almost too heavy for her to manage. Behind her, a line of impatient travelers began to form, their sighs and muttered complaints growing louder with each passing moment. A businessman in an expensive suit checked his Rolex for the third time, his frustration evident as he tapped his foot against the polished airport floor. "Come on, lady, we don't have all day," he muttered under his breath, loud enough for others to hear. A group of college students giggled as they watched Eleanor struggle to remove her shoes, their phones already out, seemingly ready to capture what they considered an amusing moment for their social media feeds. The TSA agent, overwhelmed by the morning rush, gestured impatiently for Eleanor to move faster through the metal detector, adding to the mounting pressure she felt from every direction. The mockery escalated as Eleanor reached for her bag on the conveyor belt, her aged hands shaking as she tried to lift the heavy duffel. "Maybe she should take the bus next time," a young woman in designer clothes whispered to her companion, both of them laughing as they recorded Eleanor's struggle on their phones. Another traveler, a middle-aged man with a loud voice, declared, "Some people shouldn't be allowed to fly if they can't keep up with the rest of us." The cruel comments continued as Eleanor slowly made her way toward her gate, each word cutting deeper than the last. Her eyes began to well up with tears, not from physical pain, but from the sting of humiliation that seemed to follow her wherever she went these days. She had faced enemy fire in the jungles of Vietnam, had saved countless lives under the most dangerous conditions imaginable, yet here in her own country, she felt more vulnerable than she ever had in combat. The weight of their judgment pressed down on her shoulders like the heavy packs she once carried through hostile territory. But this burden felt somehow heavier because it came from her own people. At Gate 12, Eleanor finally collapsed into a plastic chair, her composure crumbling as the tears she had been holding back began to flow freely down her weathered cheeks. Her hands shook as she reached into her jacket pocket for a tissue, inadvertently adjusting the small military pins adorned on her lapel. Among them, barely visible beneath the dim airport lighting, was a distinctive purple ribbon with a gold border. The Purple Heart, America's oldest military decoration, awarded to those wounded or killed in service to their country. As Eleanor wept silently, feeling more alone than she had in years, she had no idea that across the gate area, a pair of sharp eyes had noticed what everyone else had missed. Master Sergeant James Thompson, recently retired from his third tour in Afghanistan, had been observing the cruel treatment Eleanor received with growing anger. But it wasn't until he saw the glint of that purple ribbon that his expression changed from disgust to something approaching reverence. He recognized the significance of that small piece of fabric immediately, understanding what it represented in ways that the mockers never could. Rising from his seat with the purposeful stride of a career military man, Thompson approached Eleanor with the respect and dignity that had been so cruelly denied to her just moments before. Master Sergeant Thompson knelt beside Eleanor's chair, his voice gentle but filled with unmistakable respect as he spoke the words that would change everything. "Ma'am, I couldn't help but notice your Purple Heart. I'm Master Sergeant James Thompson, United States Army, and it would be my honor to know your story." Eleanor looked up, surprised to see genuine reverence in the eyes of this younger veteran, a stark contrast to the mockery she had endured just minutes earlier. With trembling hands, she touched the small medal on her jacket, her voice barely above a whisper as she began to speak. "I'm Eleanor Martinez, former captain, United States Army Nurse Corps. I served in Vietnam from 1968 to 1970. Thompson's eyes widened with recognition and respect as he realized he was in the presence of one of the unsung heroes of America's most controversial war. As word spread through the gate area that the elderly woman they had been mocking was a decorated Vietnam veteran, the atmosphere began to shift dramatically. Other veterans in the terminal, recognizing the Purple Heart and understanding its significance, began to gather around Eleanor with the respect and honor she deserved. The same travelers who had been recording her struggles now quietly put away their phones, shame replacing their earlier amusement as they began to understand the magnitude of their cruelty. Eleanor's story unfolded like a testament to courage that few could imagine. She had volunteered for service in Vietnam when most young women her age were protesting the war, driven by a desire to serve her country and save lives on the most dangerous battlefields. As a combat nurse stationed at the 3rd Surgical Hospital in Binh Thuy, she had worked 18-hour shifts under constant threat of enemy attack, treating wounded soldiers who arrived by helicopter throughout the day and night. Her voice grew stronger as she recounted the events that earned her the Purple Heart, describing the night when enemy rockets struck her field hospital during a particularly intense operation. Shrapnel from the attack had torn through her left shoulder and embedded in her back, but instead of seeking treatment for herself, Eleanor had continued working for 6 more hours, helping to evacuate wounded patients to safety while bleeding from her own injuries. There were boys dying on those tables, she explained, her eyes distant as she relived that terrible night. American boys who needed every minute I could give them. My wounds could wait. The growing crowd around her listened in stunned silence as she described how she had single-handedly organized the evacuation of 37 wounded soldiers, refusing medical attention until every last patient was safely airlifted to a more secure facility. The transformation in the airport terminal was nothing short of miraculous. The businessman who had complained about Eleanor's slow pace now stood with his head bowed in shame, his expensive watch forgotten as he listened to a story of sacrifice that put his daily concerns into painful perspective. The college students who had found her struggles amusing were now crying openly, their phones tucked away as they faced the reality of their own callous behavior. One by one, travelers began approaching Eleanor, not with mockery, but with gratitude. Many sharing their own family stories of military service and thanking her for her sacrifice. The TSA agents who had rushed her through security appeared at the gate to personally apologize, having heard about the decorated veteran they had treated so poorly. Master Sergeant Thompson stood at attention and rendered a crisp military salute, a gesture that was immediately followed by every veteran in the terminal and then by civilian travelers who understood the significance of the moment. As Eleanor's flight was called for boarding, the gate agent announced over the intercom that they would be boarding their wounded warrior first, a gesture met with thunderous applause from the entire terminal. Through her tears, Eleanor smiled for the first time that day, feeling the pride and recognition that had been so cruelly withheld from her and countless other veterans who had served their country with honor and distinction. Eleanor Martinez's story reminds us that heroes walk among us every day, often unrecognized and sometimes even mocked by those who have ever known the weight of service and sacrifice. Her Purple Heart represented more than just a medal. It symbolized the countless nights she spent saving lives in a war zone, the pain she endured, both physical and emotional, and the dedication she showed to her fellow Americans when they needed her most. The travelers at Chicago O'Hare learned a powerful lesson that day about the importance of looking beyond appearances and treating every person with dignity and respect, because we never know what battles they have fought or what sacrifices they have made for our freedom. The next time you see an elderly veteran struggling with a heavy bag or moving slowly through a crowd, remember Eleanor's story. Remember that the person you're looking at might have risked everything to serve their country, might have saved lives under fire, and might carry scars both visible and invisible from their service to our nation. They deserve our respect, our gratitude, and our patience, not our mockery or impatience. If Eleanor's story moved you, please subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales of American heroes whose sacrifices have protected our freedom. Share this video to honor all veterans who have served with courage and distinction, and let's work together to ensure that no hero ever faces the kind of treatment Eleanor experienced at that airport. Because in America, our veterans deserve nothing less than our deepest respect and gratitude for their service to our great nation.